So you made your first compost cage, your first compost pile, you did all the steps correctly, you followed the instructions perfectly, and now you have a finished compost pile. Is it ready to use? No. And in fact, if you skip this step that we're going to be talking about today in this video, then you're going to be wasting your compost. It's called curing. This compost needs to go through a curing process before you use it, so that way you're getting the maximum benefits from your compost. Right now, let's say it's on a scale of 10. Like peak compost, perfect compost is a 10 out of 10. If I use this compost right now, it's probably only a 2 or 3 out of 10. Still better than anything you can buy store-bought, by far better than that, but you're not using the full potential of this compost. And it requires like almost no work from you. It just requires a little bit of patience to bring this up to peak performance. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, before we get into that, if you would like a soil biology test, now, mind the mess back here. This is my compost laydown yard and it's going through some renovations right now. But if you would like an in-person, or if you'd like a soil biology test where you send me a sample of soil or compost and I test the viability of it, see what biology is in there, what needs to be in there, what we need to do to get it to the peak levels that we need it to be at, depending on what you're trying to grow, then hit up the email down below. And if you would like an on-site permaculture consultation where I come out to your property and I give you a plan of attack on the property, like what to do, where to do it, when to do it, and then you have access to me for any questions that pop up along the way. If you'd like that, then hit up the email down below as well. Now, with that being said, let's get into the video. Now, what I'm going to be doing is setting up a compost curing spot. Now, these are just loose pallets right now. I'll connect them here in a minute. But this is going to be where I put my compost after it's gone through its flips. That's the whole point of this right here. Now, people in the past have asked me about this method of composting, the Charles Dowding method of composting, where you have 3 bins and then you just flip it over to the next bin over and over again. I would say that's not a good way to make compost, but it's a fantastic design for curing compost, which is what we're going to be doing now. So keep in mind, just so everybody's on track, I made the compost, I did all the appropriate flips, and now I'm done with my flips, and I'm curing it within this pallet cage almost. I'm curing it within here, and curing it basically just means that I'm letting it sit and letting the center come down to ambient temperature. So if it's 100 degrees outside, the center of my compost pile should be around 100 degrees, maybe slightly warmer, slightly cooler. It's gonna be around 100 degrees. And at that point, I know that the temperatures are good for my fungi to start hatching out of the spores and start growing and start building networks. Right now, if I used it right now where it's still kind of warm in the center and it's still in the process of cooling down, then I know I'm gonna have very, very bacteria dominant compost, which is a good thing, but also keep in mind, like most people's soils are bacteria dominant. Most people's soils are missing the fungi, the protozoa, the nematodes, those aspects to their soil, which is what compost is basically farming. It's farming the entire soil food network. And then once we get all of those characters involved in the compost, then we can, start introducing it as in the form of extracts or potting soil or just direct applications. That's when we can get the most bang for our buck in this compost. Is once it comes down to ambient temperature, the fungi starts growing, and then the other predators start introducing themselves to the compost. Right now, super bacteria dominant, still beneficial, still far better than anything you can buy at the store. But if we put all this effort and work into making this compost, we might as well get the most bang for our buck as possible. Now, this next step is pretty self-explanatory. You're basically building a U structure. You can use pallets if you want to. I got these for free at the hardware store, but you can use really whatever you have, available to you. What I like about the pallets is it offers the slats where it already is going to be blocking some of the sun in the early and late parts of the day. But also it allows enough airflow to get in here and allow that oxygen exchange for the organisms, which is very, very important. If your organisms run out of oxygen, then they go anaerobic, and then we have a bad product versus a good product. So I like using the pallets. It still allows plenty of airflow. And then if you look at the position that I picked right here, this vegetation along the fence right here, yes, it needs to be cleaned out, but the cool benefit of it right now is that it's providing a little bit extra shade. I live in Texas, so like we need shade for the compost to make sure nothing dries out and everything, or that it doesn't get too hot and all that type of stuff. So This just helps keep the sun directly off of the tarp that's going to be going on top of the compost. And then also with this structure, it allows me to cover the compost up with the tarp without the tarp coming in direct contact with the compost. Because if it comes in direct contact with the compost, that area where they come in contact is going to go anaerobic because there's no respiration allowed within that compost. So that's why I like going this route, but you can use whatever material you want for your compost curing cage. And also keep in mind, like, you can cure your compost in the same cage that you made your compost. It's just, for me, I would like to remove the compost from that cage and then use that cage to make more compost. And also the downside of curing it within that cage is that you're allowing a little bit too much air. So you're allowing, you're increasing the surface area of the compost, allowing more water to evaporate from the compost. So this, like a cylinder, isn't the most efficient design for volume for your like surface area. You want the least amount of surface area for the highest amount of volume, which is typically a sphere. That's the most efficient volume to surface area shape. And we're going to be mimicking somewhat of a sphere, like a half sphere, in this you know, pallet cage that I've created. We're going to be making basically a dome, which is going to be much more efficient on water retention than a cylinder shape will be. And I know that that's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but believe it or not, it's actually kind of important. I should also say that you want the compost to stay in contact with the ground. There's going to be a natural exchange of microbes just by it being in the ground. It's also going to allow the earthworms to get up in your compost as well. So if at all possible, try to keep it in contact with the ground, your compost, when it's curing, and you'll just get even better results out of that. Now the only thing left to do is to move the compost over to this area, and then I'll talk about maintenance after that to bring it down to ambient temperatures. And then also the background, you can see that I have a garden right over there. Think of my permaculture zoning when it comes to my compost. My inputs for the compost are all relatively close. Like one of the main inputs that I use are the grass clippings. I mow this yard and I collect the grass for the compost. My garden over there, the garden waste from the garden goes directly into the compost and it gets turned into compost. I have chickens right over there. Their bedding gets put into the compost making materials, and the point is that it's all relatively close to each other. Nothing is like too far away or making it more difficult to make compost. My compost making facility, my compost section, is relatively close to the inputs for the compost. I got garden right there, got my yard right here, I got chickens right over there. Those are most of the ingredients for a compost, and they're all relatively close. So think about your zoning whenever you're building your compost, we'll call it lab, your compost lab. Think about zoning, and it'll save you quite a bit of headache. Now, something else to think about when you're setting up your compost making facility is where your compost is going to finish in relation to where you're going to be having it cure. So, as you can see right here, if I take a scoop of this compost and I bring it all the way over here, there's steps involved. So ideally in the future, so I'm bringing out the wheelbarrow so I can load up the wheelbarrow and then dump it into my compost curing stage. But in the future, one thing that I'll do is start my compost here, flip this direction, so by the time it's ready to cure, it's already within close proximity of the curing stage. So whenever I'm like ready to put it in the curing box, all I have to do is flip it, and I don't have to bring out the wheelbarrow or anything like that to move materials. So overall, be thinking about how things are going to work, how you're going to interact with everything, and the proximity of these systems that work together. So keep that in mind. But all I'm going to be basically doing here is loading up my compost into the wheelbarrow. If I see any clumps or anything like that, I'll break it up, and yeah, and then I'll take the wheelbarrow and move it into the compost curing stage, curing area. Also, while I'm doing this, I'm going to be monitoring the moisture content. If it's dry, then I'll go ahead and add a little bit of water. And if it's too wet, then I'm doing exactly what I need to do to limit or mitigate the amount of moisture, and that's introduce airflow within the compost pile. Now, while I'm doing this, I might as well give you guys more information about compost. But inevitably, whenever I do videos about compost, there's always going to be somebody saying like, oh, I don't do compost, instead I do X, Y, and Z. There is no alternative to making compost. Like there really isn't. Now you might be thinking like, oh, I have good success with my nitrogen-based fertilizers and stuff like that. And you're right, you 100% will have good success by using some of those store-bought like 30-30-30 or anything like that, or even like using the anaerobic methods of composting. Those all work, but you have to keep doing it. That's the benefit of the compost, is that once I get the soil right, once I get the organisms correct in my soil, I have removed myself from the fertilization loop within my gardens, my orchard, my whatever it may be, whatever your growing system may be. You're removing yourself from the entire fertilization loop. It's not something I have to worry about year after year or anything like that, because I know the microbes are going to be doing their job, and that's providing whatever the plant may need. That's the microbe's job, is to provide on demand what the plant needs, versus a system where I have to do NPK tests, I have to go buy store-bought fertilizer, or I have to make an anaerobic tea, and I have to do that year after year after year, sometimes multiple times within a season, and it changes depending on what I'm trying to grow. Instead, I could just put but the organisms in place that are gonna do all that for me without my intervention. As long as I do two things: I don't create compaction, so no more tilling, and I don't create anaerobic conditions, so no more pesticides, herbicides, or anything like that. And then also, the more you do this, the more you realize like, oh, I don't need any of those anyways, because the organisms are keeping my plants safe from blight, disease, fungal infections, pests, anything like that. For example, like if I grow a tomato in what's called biocomplete soil, and I look under the leaf of that tomato under a microscope, only 70% of that actual leaf is visible. The rest of it is covered in these bacteria, fungal networks on the surface of the plant, not allowing the pest or the blight or the disease or whatever to take hold or even penetrate into the leaf. It's like a standing army for your garden, for your plants. So all that to say, there is no alternative to making compost. There are things that you can do that also work, but is not a substitute for compost. Also, inevitably, somebody's going to tell me about their cold composting method that they use and have fantastic results. I'm sure you do, but you also have to keep making that cold compost. You have to keep doing that year after year after year, and chances are, if you're making a cold compost pile, you're not really putting good ingredients into your soil or good organisms into your soil. The benefit of going a hot composting method or a thermophilic process is that I can be super dirty with the ingredients, because it's all going to go through that very hot center of the compost, which is going to kill any pathogens and any weed seeds. Your compost should not grow weeds. It doesn't even have the ability to grow weeds. The fungal to bacteria ratio within your compost is so high that weeds have no job within your compost. So if your compost is growing weed, like a very easy litmus test you can do is, if your compost is growing weeds, you know you have bad compost. And if your cold compost is growing weeds, then you know, oh, I didn't kill those weed seeds, or I haven't provided the right ingredients or the right environment for my microbes to thrive. Because if microbes are thriving, weeds can't grow, because weeds have no job. And it makes more sense once you understand the purpose of weeds, like the job that weeds have. Weeds are there to fix something within the soil, like dandelions, for example. Like those are decompaction weeds. So if I see a bunch of dandelions in a yard, I know that that yard has some serious compaction issues. So what I can do is decompact the soil, get down some seeds, get down some organisms, and then I won't have any more dandelions. Now, bad example, because dandelions are super, super helpful and very, very medicinal. So try not to get rid of the dandelions if at all possible. But another example is like some people burn their pastures. It's a very common practice up in Kansas, and it's absolutely the wrong thing to do. You should not be burning your pastures. It should be a very occasional thing that nature does whenever there's dry lightning. That's when you should burn your pastures. The weed effect that you get from burning your pastures is that you typically get a lot of ferns, for example. And ferns tend to be high in cyanide. Why are they high in cyanide? Because they're replacing the phosphorus that all just got burnt up by burning your pastures. It's replacing the phosphorus, and it has to accomplish its job. So anything that might be eating the ferns will slowly die from cyanide poisoning or cyanide accumulation, because the ferns are there to do something. They're there to fix something that we screwed up. It's like its own little defense network or defense system. So keep that in mind. Weeds serve a purpose. They're indicators. There's no replacement for compost. And if you're composting, you might as well do a hot composting method. Now, another thing that's going to pop up is like the physical inability to flip compost. And that I totally understand. I totally get it. There are alternatives that require very, very little flipping, like the Johnson Su bioreactor. I haven't made it myself, but I've seen the results from a Johnson Su bioreactor, and I would say that is a good alternative to doing your hot compost flips and whatnot. It's still a thermophilic composting process. It's just there's very, very few flips involved. I think total, now it does take a long time to make, so keep that in mind, like 9 months to 12 months, somewhere around there. But I think there's only one flip in the whole system, like halfway through, I'm pretty sure. All right, it's built and everything is moved. So really, as far as maintenance goes, you're just gonna monitor the temperature and wait for the center of this pile to come down to ambient temperature. That's what you're mainly gonna be doing. Also, you're going to be maintaining the moisture content. So just take like a handy dandy watering can is what I'm trying to say. Just take your watering can, leave it outside, leave it ambient temperature, let it come down to ambient temperature so that way it's not too hot or too cold, and then you're just gonna water the surface of this once the moisture starts dropping. Now the ideal moisture content is if I take a handful of this compost, squeeze it, I should have 1 drop form and fall, and that's the ideal water content. That's about 50% water content within your compost pile, and that's what you want to shoot for. Now I did get a little bit of grass in here, just scooping up the compost from the grass. Try not to do that, because then those are things that haven't gone through the thermophilic center of your hot compost, so try not to add anything new like that to this compost pile. Now, some things you can add to this compost pile at this point is your volcanic rock dust. If you're trying to get like long-term inorganic material for your microbes to start breaking down, that would be a benefit, a high benefit. Also, your steel cut organic oats. That's fantastic fungal food. So let's say you're shooting for something that's fungal dominant, like 10,000 to 1 fungi to bacteria, like for your orchard or something like that, then you might want to feed steel cut oats to your compost pile. And then like other things like maybe sea kelp, it all kind of depends on what you're trying to add to your compost pile or what the end goal of the compost pile is. But this is when you add things that don't require going through that cleansing process. As far as watering goes, you just water the surface of it, and because of the structure of your compost, that perfect crumb structure, the water is going to naturally filter through your compost. So don't worry about like the center not getting watered or it all just beating off. It's not going to do that. It's all going to filter through your compost, and everything that needs water is going to get water as long as you water in from the top. And now it's just a waiting game. Now, how long does it take for your compost to come down to ambient temperature? And that is the classic permaculture answer of it depends. It depends on how much party food or high nitrogen inputs you put in from the beginning. You're basically waiting for those high nitrogen inputs to start running out and for the bacteria to start calming down. And then the other things will grow, and then it'll hit ambient temperature. But it could take anywhere from 2 weeks to a month and a half. It all just kind of depends. That's where the constant monitoring kind of comes into play, of taking your compost thermometer, putting it halfway, just above the halfway point. That's going to be your hottest point. And once that comes down to ambient temperature, then you have cured compost. Now, real quick, because I forgot this while I was filming the video, you got to cover it with the tarp. You want to cover the entire area of the compost with a tarp. Probably not that one. I bought a brand new one just for this. There it is. But you want to cover everything up with a tarp. And you can screw it into place if you want to. I would only screw in the back ends and then weight down the other end, the front end, so that way you can easily access your compost and everything. But this is going to make sure you're not losing excess water to evaporation. And it's going to be easier to maintain your water content within this compost if you cover everything with a tarp. So there you go. Definitely cover your compost area with a tarp. Hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Oh, and also real quick, once it's cured, then you can use it for whatever you want and it at its full potential too. And once it's cured, you have about a 3-month window of peak performance before it starts coming back down and stabilizing like it would in normal soils and stuff like that. So hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. Hopefully it answered some questions that you guys had. Sorry about the compost rant that I had in the video, but I feel much better afterwards. Again, if you want a soil biology test, hit up the email. If you want an on-site consultation, hit up the email. I'll see you guys next time.